Hello and welcome to Reportage with Danish bin Nabi. In this segment of Reportage, I shall review the recently released book, The Great Unravelling, India After 2014, written by Sanjay Jha. The book is divided in 6 chapters that deals with demonetization, failing of institutions, economy, and more importantly, how social media has decimated the social fabric of India. Let's listen into Sanjay Jha. Mr. Jha, you have extensively written about social media, how it has decimated the social fabric. What role actually WhatsApp has played in building up the narrative, a false narrative we can say?
Well, Danish, I can tell you this for a fact that today, in the world of social media, everyone gets a personalized information on their mobile phones. Unfortunately, this has been very grossly abused. To give you an example, even if you look at what happened in the United States recently, Donald Trump, the president of America, what an unprecedented, surrealistic development that the most powerful man in the world, who has the nuclear buttons under his control, is denied access to Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Why? For only one reason, that politicians have this propensity to abuse the power of their access. And if you have the most powerful man in the world instigating mobs, using it for dog whistle politics, provoking or instigating mobs into violent conduct, spreading fake news, threatening people, actually, in a great number of ways, playing a very divisive politics on social media, then you do realize, Danish, that India remains equally vulnerable. Today, and I'm not going to beat about the bush, the Bharatiya Janata Party's IT cell has assumed such notoriety for willfully spreading distorted information. Now, I can understand an occasional error of, maybe some fact that may not have been totally researched. But when fake news becomes political strategy, then we are in trouble. Because then the party is willingly spreading misinformation, disinformation, and concocted news to influence voters or the people at large. And I mentioned this in my book, The Great Unravelling, India After 2014. I mentioned this in the book, that during the Uttar Pradesh elections, there were over 50,000 WhatsApp groups that were being run by the BJP. So my basic point is that in Uttar Pradesh elections, there were WhatsApp groups floated by the BJP that said that over a period of X number of years, the Muslim population will exceed the Hindu population in India. Now, all these are nothing but mathematical fantasies and the spread of malicious propaganda to create fear. And therefore, all of us as citizens of our society need to fight it.
Mr. Jha, why is Congress failing in building its own narrative, the liberal narrative which they always talk about?
Well, I think the Congress has not yet recovered from the 2 knockout blows in the Lok Sabha elections of 2014 and 19. The party is struggling to get its act together. The party has not been able to even sort out its leadership problem after 1.5 years after losing the last Lok Sabha election. We don't have transparent inner party democracy. And I think we are responsible for demoralizing our own workforce. So I'm hopeful that in January, a little later this month or early February, there is going to be an AICC session. At least that is what has been promised. There will be a new Congress president, even if Mr. Gandhi is deciding to fight it himself. And hopefully there will be a more open election to the Congress Working Committee. And I'm hopeful that when that happens, the Congress will be able to gather the courage and the capacity to take on the BJP.
Mr. Jha, you write, and I quote, most marketable weapon is fear. Islamophobia is a popular currency too. Mr. Jha, is Islam being used as a political tool in India now?
Well, Danish, there is no denying that India is going through a phase of a Hindutva consolidation that the BJP is encouraging. Ultimately, let us accept the reality that the development plank was only a very clever camouflage to push the RSS game plan into Indian politics. Let's take a couple of examples. You find that there is a stand up comedian who's been arrested for apparently offending the sensibilities of the majority community. But so far, there is no evidence or charge sheet that is able to establish what exactly did he say that was very insulting or demeaning to the people who were watching his show. Now, this is suppression of somebody's fundamental right. Let's give you another example. You remember in the 2014 to 19 NDA 1, love jihad was being talked about as a propaganda tool by the fringe elements, the Bajrang Dals and the more extremist fundamentalist units of the Sangh Parivar. Today, it is becoming a law under BJP governments, elected governments, chosen by the popular mandate. Now, because they have the majority, they are actually enforcing a strict anti-love jihad law. Now, what is that going to do? That is going to destroy the social fabric of India, because an interfaith marriage is part of our democratic rights. It is a fundamental right of a person to choose who they want to marry. And now you have a situation where even that is going to be curtailed. And therefore, in my opinion, I do believe that, as the Allahabad High Court judgment has said, that these are unconstitutional. And I do hope the Supreme Court will pass a verdict on that soon. But we are going through a period of a deep social disharmony. And I think it is being caused by a very deliberate state interference in the fundamental rights of people to live the life the way they want to.
Mr. Jha, at this point of time, let's go back a bit. 2012, 2013, you have written about Anna Hazare and Kejriwal movement, their agitation. Do you think they were backed by RSS and BJP?
Absolutely. In fact, Mr. Prashant Bhushan, who was part of the India Against Corruption, publicly stated recently that the India Against Corruption movement, led by Anna Hazare, supported aggressively by Arvind Kejriwal, was an RSS sponsorship movement. And look at it interestingly, Danish, that the two biggest political beneficiaries of that movement are, number one, Arvind Kejriwal, who ended up becoming the chief minister of Delhi, and Mr. Modi, who shot from the shoulders, or rather not just Mr. Modi, but the BJP. They shot from the shoulders of the movement, completely stigmatized the UPA as a corrupt political formation, and now he is the prime minister. So yes, the short answer is it had an RSS backing.
Did Congress fail to understand that agitation of 2012 and 13?
Absolutely. In my opinion, yes, there were charges being made. But, the truth is that the CAG reports were voodoo economics. I mean, 1,76,000 crores, 1,86,000 crore, 2G spectrum coal. It was all voodoo economics. It was complete outrageous balderdash. India doesn't have that kind of financial base for corruption. So Vinod Rai had a very duplicitous role to play. I mean, that cannot be denied. And the Congress, being in government, not being able to use its own intelligence to find out that the Anna Hazare movement had a clear ideological, political agenda.
And since then, Anna Hazare, since 2014 till 2020, in last 6 years, we have not seen Anna Hazare agitating anywhere on any issue of the government.
I honestly believe that Anna Hazare took the entire country for a jolly big ride. uh, I think it just disappeared, right? The whole purpose was to make him appear like a very dispassionate, impartial Gandhian who was taking on corruption. And corruption is an emotive issue, Danish. Everybody wants corruption to be obliterated from our country. So he was used as a pure puppet. He was manipulated. He enjoyed it because if you remember, in his village, you had all the Obi-Wans and all the topmost journalists were interviewing this person who was being called the modern Mahatma Gandhi, for heaven's sake. And now, of course, as you see,
Mr. Jha, you have written about Gujarat genocide as well. You write, and I quote, that it was India's first state-sponsored genocide. And then you go on to write that Congress party altogether dropped it from its agenda. Do you think it has dented Congress in certain way?
it certainly has. Of course, it has. Because we began to practice Janodhari politics, trying to, be a second team of the BJP, some Hindutva light, or as they call it, soft Hindutva. See, the fact of the matter is that the Sikh riots that happened in 1984 wasn't shameful and a terrible tragedy for India. It is a blot that can never be, frankly, removed. But in Gujarat, what happened in 2002, Danish, the state looked away while over 1,000 people were slaughtered in cold blood. And yes, there were both Hindus and Muslims who died, but the majority were the minority community. I think the tragedy of Gujarat was that the state apparatus remained indifferent, disinterested, and allowed the vulgar violence to continue unchecked, uncontrolled. The Congress party should have never allowed that human massacre, which ought to have never happened, to be compromised just because there was a change in political dynamics and Mr. Modi became the Prime Minister of the Chief Minister. I think we allowed, there were people within the Congress who allowed a silence to prevail. And they took this concerted decision to not make Gujarat 2002 an issue on the political agenda of the party, because it should have been. Because the Congress party got accused of minority appeasement, which is, by the way, in my opinion, total rubbish. Because if you look at minority representation in government jobs, etc., it's pretty much negligible. But the Congress party should have gone to town and convinced the people of India that the BJP was practicing sectarian and extremely dangerous polarization.
And Congress has paid for it, right?
Yeah, it has. Because let me tell you, there are large sections of the minority Muslims in India who have felt threatened and insecure since the BJP came to power. Now, the only party they could really trust at a national level had to be the Congress. But the Congress's, two-faced approach would make anyone extremely nervous about, is the Congress party also practicing, majoritarian politics to try and make sure that its votes don't fall? But, in politics, first you have to follow a principle, and then you bring in the politics. If you bring in the politics first and the principle later,
Mr. Jha, let's talk about your friend Arnab Goswami. You have given a detailed account of Goswami as well, but then you go on to write that he cannot take criticism. Can you elaborate?
Well, I think Arnab's problem is that this happens when you become hugely successful. You begin to believe that you're God, that you're infallible, you're impregnable, and you're larger than life. Arnab's problem has been that success can drive you a little cuckoo in the head, and in a great number of ways, when he's challenged, he basically recoils, and then you have an extremely visceral response from him of anger and, to a great extent, a hurt ego. That's what happened between me and him in his studio. I was taken aback when I questioned Arnab on a certain incident that happened when Rahul Gandhi came back from his long sabbatical. Arnab's reaction was terribly irrational, unjustified. But it goes to tell you that everyone has a feet of clay, and his recent troubles, whether it is to do with his arrest or the TRP scam or the kind of extremely nasty propaganda that he's done on behalf of the BJP, has damaged his image and reputation. I think once upon a time he was a very fine guy.
Mr. Jha, you have also written about Kanishka Singh, private secretary of Rahul Gandhi. When he called you about for an interview, Rahul had an interview with Arnab Goswami. Do you think it was a blunder on Rahul Gandhi's part to give his first interview to Arnab Goswami?
Well, it was a monumental error of judgment. I mean, if Rahul had been watching television, which I assume he was, he would have known that Arnab was really anti-UPA. And therefore, by default, he was very anti-Congress and in particular the Gandhi family, whom he did not genuinely respect. If you follow the conversations, he believed that the Gandhi family's dynastic domination of the Congress was unhealthy for Indian democracy, and that's a debatable topic. He's entitled to that opinion. We must concede that point. But as far as the Congress party was concerned, I mean, it should have known that you could have gone to any other television editor and done a long program. And as I've written in the book, I think the people who advised Rahul probably told him that if you go on Arnab's show, you're likely to be on the most popular television show in India. And the Times of India will promote it, or Times Now will promote it in a humongous way. And that way you'll be able to capture the Indian mood and the public imagination. Now, it would have worked wonders for him and the Congress if Rahul had come out in flying colors. It did not, right? And therefore it completely boomeranged. It destroyed Rahul's image. People began to call him Papu. The BJP made political capital out of that entire episode. And the Congress never recovered in 2014. And even today, Rahul is very reluctant to go on television because that for him has become a case of once bitten.
Mr. Jha, this brings me to some conspiracy theories. Many believe that many of the senior and strong Congress leaders are backed by RSS and BJP. Can we say same about Kanishka Singh? Because Rahul was completely ill-advised to go on Arnab's show.
Well, I don't think, Danish, that Kanishk would have. Kanishk had a lot of influence on Rahul, as any bright, talented, frankly, an outstanding personality. If you meet Kanishk in person, I think he's one of the brightest people I've met at a very young age. Very cerebral, intellectually, stimulating conversations with him. I find him very, very sharp. But I don't think he had the clout to tell Rahul to do the Arnab Goswami interview. I do believe there were other senior Congress leaders who took this call, not necessarily because they were RSS friendly, because I think in their political arrogance, they believed they were doing the right thing by Rahul.
Mr. Jha, you have also written how Rahul Gandhi likes a PowerPoint presentation on certain issues or on all the issues. You have also given him a PowerPoint presentation in 2017, if I am correct, how to resurrect Congress. But as of now, nothing has happened on that part.
Very disappointing. They see this. I do believe that Rahul is doing the right thing by listening to different people, younger people from all walks of life. Politicians have a good grassroots sixth sense, but so do analysts, people from the media, management students, strategists, data scientists. Everyone brings something new to the table. But Danish, I think the problem is that Rahul's coterie around him very often do not allow him access to people who can give a more tangible, realistic, and constructive suggestions that might be uncomfortable to hear, but it will be good for the party. I think the coterie around Rahul very often denies him the access to information that he must have. And my presentation that was extremely detailed, very comprehensive. I'd put in a lot of facts and figures. I'd even mentioned in that how Rahul should actually use his day from 9 to 9 in allocating time for various activities. Unfortunately, Rahul never heard it. And it was not
Mr. Jha,
something
my
I could have
last
said
question
to
now. Your book starts with your interview in mid 80s or late 80s, where you have instantly said Mahatma Gandhi. Then, somewhere in between the book, you write, and I quote, India has moved further towards the far right. On 23rd May 2019, Mahatma Gandhi was killed over again. Can you elaborate a bit?
Danish, I can tell you Mahatma Gandhi was killed again just 2 days ago. I heard my book starts with that interview because I talk of Mahatma Gandhi as the one person I would love to meet if I had a chance and a choice. And I mentioned about how a BJP MP from Bhopal, the Pragya Singh Thakur, called Nathuram Godse the murderer of Gandhiji, father of the nation, a patriot. So according to the BJP, in my opinion, Gandhiji became an anti-national, right? If his killer is a patriot, then Gandhiji becomes an anti-national. And that's a tragedy. I mean, how can we insult the father of the nation like this? And 2 days ago, as you heard again, Pragya Singh Thakur said the same thing. So, a leopard can't change their spots. And the BJP, might still make these larger than life, holistic statements about India's diversity. But I think Danish, India's biggest challenge going forward will be to maintain its multicultural character and its religious diversity.
Mr. Jha, pleasure talking to me. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you very much, Danish, for inviting me.